The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Jesus was praying in a certain place, and when he had finished, one of his disciples said to him, "Lord, teach us to pray just as John taught his disciples." He said to them, "When you pray, say, Father, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come. Give us each day our daily bread, and forgive us our sins, for we ourselves forgive anyone in debt to us. And do not subject us to the final test." And he said to them, "Suppose one of you has a friend to whom he goes at midnight and says, 'Friend, lend me 3 loaves of bread, for a friend of mine has arrived at my house from a journey, and I have nothing to offer him.' And he says in reply from within, 'Do not bother me. The door has already been locked, and my children and I are already in bed. I cannot get up to give you anything.' I tell you, if he does not get up to give the visitor the loaves because of their friendship, he will get up to give him whatever he needs because of his persistence. And I tell you, ask and you will receive. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, and the one who seeks finds. And to the one who knocks, the door will be opened. What father among you would hand his son a snake when he asks for a fish? Or hand him a scorpion when he asks for an egg? If you then, who are wicked, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will the Father in heaven give the Holy Spirit to those who ask him?" The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. Last weekend I sort of mentioned how we would be hearing about prayer in this weekend's gospel reading. And here we are. Jesus talks to us about prayer, and he makes some pretty bold statements about it, almost as if he were exaggerating about prayer. He says, "Ask and you will receive. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, and the one who seeks finds, and the one who knocks, the door will be opened." And the reason that I say that these are bold statements about prayer is because we can seriously ask ourselves, is this even true? Does God actually answer all of your prayers? Because experience shows us that he in fact does not answer all of our prayers. We don't get everything we ask for in prayer. So really, shouldn't have Jesus had said, sometimes the one who asks receives, and sometimes the one who seeks finds, and sometimes the one who knocks, the door will be opened. Because it seems like prayer doesn't always work. And because of this, the temptation here is to treat these words of Jesus like they are poetry. We admire them for their beauty, but we don't always take them literally. And we have to be careful of that, because that's not how Jesus intended these words to be interpreted. Yes, they are beautiful, but they aren't just meant to be poetic. He actually means these words. He actually means that God answers all of your prayers all of the time, every time. But Jesus knew that we would be tempted to doubt that. And so he doubles down by giving us examples. He says, what earthly father would torture his children by giving them, stones instead of bread, or a scorpion instead of an egg? And of course not. A father would not do that. My brothers and I always thought that was hilarious, that Jesus would use such an extreme example, and we sort of laughed to each other in church when this reading would come up. Because handing somebody a scorpion when they ask for an egg is ridiculous. It is, and it's meant to be that way. That's Jesus' point. Nobody would ever do that. Even though we are fallen human beings, selfish sinners, wicked, in the words of Jesus, actually. Jesus says that even wicked people still try to give good things to those that they love. And then he reminds us that God, our Father in heaven, who is completely unselfish and his love is infinite, he will give us even greater things, of course. God will hear every request that we ask of him and answer it even more generously than we could possibly have hoped for. And that makes sense, but still, how is it possible that all of our prayers are answered? What if 2 people have opposing prayers? What happens then? What if, 2 people are praying that they get hired to the same job opening? God can't possibly answer both of those prayers, can he? And so it happens that sometimes God doesn't give us the answer that we were looking for. He doesn't meet our needs. But I challenge you with this question. Does that mean that he hasn't answered our prayers? And an even deeper question, do I really know what prayer even is, or what it's meant for? And even more basic than that, do I understand who God is? Because I think sometimes that we treat God like he is Google or Amazon. That we want answers and we want results and we want them now, or we want them yesterday. But that isn't how God works, and that's not who God is. God is a person. He's three persons, in fact, and you don't treat persons like Amazon or Google. You have conversations with persons. And I think sometimes we fail to treat prayer as a conversation, and we treat it as a list of demands, or like their wishes from a genie. We ask God for stuff, and when he doesn't give us those things, we doubt in that genie of ours. And we ask, how can God be so mean? And we pout and protest as to how unfair that genie is. But God isn't a genie. God does, in fact, answer every single prayer. We just need to remind ourselves that one of the possible answers to our prayers is no. The answer to a request can come in three different forms. St. Augustine, he addresses prayer in this way. St. Augustine was a bishop in northern Africa in the 5th century, and he said that if we ask God for something in prayer, he can say three things to us in response. First, he can say, okay, and he gives us what we're asking for, and that's pretty simple. Another answer that he can give us is he can simply say no, which means that what we're asking for isn't God's will, and it isn't for our own good. Like I said, we have to remember that sometimes no is an answer. And as every parent knows, sometimes no is the most loving answer possible. Parents say no to a lot of things for their children. No, you can't play with knives. No, you can't play with fire. No, you can't drink Clorox. Swallow a bottle of Tylenol. No, you can't only eat potato chips. No, you can't climb on the roof. It's for the child's own good. So really, God isn't even saying no. Rather, he's saying to us, I've got something better in mind for you. And then the third response that God can give to our prayers is yes, but not right now. And that requires patience on our part. And real patience isn't just simply waiting around for God to do his work. Real patience means letting God choose the right moment to act in our lives and surrendering that to him. So those are the three responses that God has to our prayer. Yes, no, and not yet. And God always chooses one of those three. We have to keep that in mind. God always gives us an answer. We have to be listening for what those answers might be. And knowing that will save us from throwing spiritual temper tantrums when God doesn't give us exactly what we want. Now, I need to make an important distinction. I don't say all of this to mean that sin and death are for our good. We can't look at it like that. Sin is never good, and death is a result of sin and our imperfect human nature. But even with all of that in mind, God can bring good out of every tragedy, and he can heal every sinful heart, and he can repair our broken humanity. I always like to think of it this way. I think I've used this example before, this illustration. God's plan is sort of like the backside of a sewing project. My mom, she was always crocheting or cross-stitching sorts of needlework, and I can remember seeing her sitting there in her rocking chair she always would put 2 sets of glasses on to really magnify her sewing work, and she would have whatever it is that she was working on, in an embroidery hoop or something like that, and from anywhere in the room you would see what she was working on from the backside. And if you know a cross-stitch project from the backside, it doesn't look like anything. It's a mess. a bunch of colors. There's no pattern to it. It's just a backside of a bunch of stitches. And so it doesn't make sense. But from Mom's perspective, she can see everything as it's proceeding along, and it's basically a work of art. Now, if one of us were to start complaining to Mom that she's making a mess of things, that she doesn't know what she's doing, then that would be pretty foolish, right? But we didn't say that because we trusted Mom, and we knew that her projects always turned out really great. And every once in a while, Mom would turn the project around to show us the progress that she was making on it. And sometimes our prayers are like that. We think that we know what's best, and we just don't understand why God doesn't grant our prayer or answer our prayer in a certain way. But actually, we're only looking at sort of the backside of God's plan. We can't see the whole picture. But His perspective is complete. And so when He doesn't answer our prayers in exactly the way that we would like Him to, we can be sure that it's because He has something better in mind, or that He can see the whole picture, even if we can't possibly imagine what that something better will be for us. It seems to me that the only time when we doubt whether or not God hears our prayers is when we don't get what we want. If we say a prayer of thanksgiving before or after meals, we're not doubting God because the food is right in front of us, right? And we never complain about that. But when life is going smoothly, it's easy to believe, it's easy to trust. But when things go wrong, we face a material or an emotional or a spiritual crisis, then our faith can really be put to the test. And those moments are extremely valuable. They're extremely valuable for your spiritual growth because they teach us a lot. I don't know about you, but I'm kind of a baby when it comes to suffering. And that's why I need Mom to turn that embroidery around so that I can see what she's working on. And that's basically what God is doing for us right now. He's turning that embroidery hoop around for us to see what He's working on. Coming to Mass is like coming and sitting beside Mom or on her lap and seeing what she's working on, because so often we're only looking at the backside where we can't really understand where the things are mixed up and the colors don't make sense and everything seems to be in chaos. So when we're tested, God says, here, sit beside me and let me show you what I'm working on. And that's what we're doing here at Mass. We not only sit down in His presence, but we actually receive Him in the Eucharist. And that Eucharist is a promise to us that He answers all of our prayers, that He loves us beyond any form of earthly love, beyond any earthly father, that His generosity has no limits, and that when we have to wait a bit, where God says no, we have to keep in mind that His plan for you is more generous, more merciful, and more amazing than anything you could ever imagine.